As we grow in our understanding of Bible translation, we want to focus on the Middle East and see what we can learn about the history of Bible translation into Arabic. In this series, we'll discover one of the most amazing missionaries you've never heard of, as well as seek to understand a significant controversy in the history of Bible translation. I'm Andrew Case, and this is Working for the Word. Here we go. Before we get started, I should say a few things about this series. First, I want to learn from the challenges and experiences of Bible translators in other countries and from other moments in history and see how God was working. Now, second, I want to acknowledge that I have not studied Arabic and have never been to a country in the Middle East besides Israel, which is why I'll be having people on here who have that expertise and can speak more authoritatively on the language and culture. Now, third, when we arrive at parts of Arabic Bible translation that are controversial, I'll be genuinely striving to present both sides as fairly as possible, while at the same time making clear where my own bias lies. The point will be to seek a humble understanding and encourage better conversations. So, to begin this series, we need to start with the basics, right? What is the Arabic language like, is the first question. And to do that, I asked a new friend of mine who's a kind of Semitics junkie. His name is Darren Duke, and he's currently finishing a PhD in Semitics after having had a successful career in the U.S. military overseas, which involved him learning both Arabic and modern Hebrew. He's traveled a lot, loves languages, also speaks French, and works for the Center for Hebraic Thought. I met him while at the conference on Bible literacy in Philadelphia back in October. But right before we listen to him, I want to include a quick overview of Arabic to complement the conversation by a YouTube channel called Lang Focus. So let's listen to that, and then we'll get into the interview.
Arabic is the fifth most widely spoken language in the world, with 293 million native speakers and 422 million speakers in total. It's an official language in 26 countries. That doesn't mean it's the majority language in all of those countries, but it's one of the official languages. It is also one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations, and as the language of the Quran, the Holy Book of Islam, it is also the liturgical language of 1.7 billion Muslims around the world. Most of those people don't speak Arabic, but many have some knowledge of Arabic for reading and for reciting prayers and religious study. Speaking about Arabic can be confusing because there are many different varieties of the language. One of the main varieties is the classical Arabic of the Quran. This is considered by many to be the most perfect form of Arabic. And some say it's the only true Arabic, because it was the language in which God revealed the Quran to Muhammad. Then there's Modern Standard Arabic, which is the form of Arabic used as an official language today. It's the modern form of literary Arabic, which was based on the classical Arabic of the Quran, but with some adaptations and a greatly expanded vocabulary to make it more suitable for modern times. It's not exactly the same as classical Arabic, but both of them are referred to by Arabs as al-Fusha, meaning eloquent speech. Modern Standard Arabic is the language of books, media, education, and formal situations, but not as the language of everyday speech. For everyday speech, Arabic speakers use their local dialects, or عامية, which can differ quite significantly from country to country, and even from one place to another within a single country. Arabic is well known for its state of diglossia. Arabic speakers use 2 distinctly different forms of the language in parallel for different purposes. Modern Standard Arabic is not learned by anyone as a native language, but it's used in reading and writing, in media, on children's TV shows, and in formal speeches, while the colloquial dialects are used almost universally for daily conversation. As I mentioned before, there's quite a lot of variation amongst Arabic dialects. How well 2 speakers understand each other depends on the geographic distance of their dialects as well as exposure. Many Arabic speakers have told me that speakers of the Middle Eastern dialects really have no trouble understanding each other, and that the main trouble comes in understanding the Maghrebi dialects, especially Moroccan. But these days, with the spread of cable TV and the internet, people are being exposed to a wider range of dialects on a more regular basis, which helps people understand different dialects more. And of course, there's also Al-Fusha, Modern Standard Arabic. When speakers of significantly different dialects communicate with each other, they can switch to Modern Standard Arabic, or they can adjust their speech to make it more formal and literary and similar to Modern Standard Arabic, but not exactly. Another common way for native speakers to bridge the dialect gap is to use something called the white dialect, which is a more formal version of dialectal speech that uses features that are common to most of the different dialects, but it leaves out features that are limited to specific dialects. This is essentially a modern Arabic Koine. So what's Arabic like? Let's take a look at some features of Arabic focusing on Modern Standard Arabic. The Arabic script is written from right to left and consists of letters that imitate handwriting. Most letters join to the letter that comes after them. However, a few letters remain disjoined. The letters that join have two forms, one short form at the beginning or in the middle of words, and another long form at the end of words, or when the letter is by itself. The Arabic script is an abjad, meaning that each letter represents a consonant, and that short vowels are not really written, and that long vowels and diphthongs can be ambiguous. Also, Arabic can be written with harakat, which are extra diacritic markings that indicate the short vowel sounds. These are generally only used in texts that are really important to pronounce perfectly, like the Quran or poetry, or children's material. Arabic has a number of consonant sounds which are surprising or challenging for speakers of many other languages. For example, kha, as in the word
خليج
meaning gulf. Then there's qaf, as in the word
قلم
pen. This is like a K, but pronounced further back in your throat. Then there's the letter ha, like in the word
حار
meaning hot. Ghain. Some say that this is similar to the French R sound. For example, the word
غرفة
meaning room. Arabic also has a number of emphatic consonants. For example, there's sin, which is like a regular S sound in English, but there is also sad, which is an emphatic S, as in the word
صغير
meaning small. Also notice the ghain in the middle. To make this sound, you have to keep your tongue close to the roof of your mouth. If you want to try it, position your mouth as though you are going to say a K, and hold that position, then make an S sound instead. Go ahead, try it. Saw, saw. There are three other emphatic consonants too, an emphatic ta, dad, and za. Modern Standard Arabic is a VSO language by default, as opposed to Arabic dialects, which are mainly SVO. One aspect of Standard Arabic is cases. There are three cases in Arabic: nominative, genitive, and accusative, and nouns take special endings to show their function in the sentence. Let's take the word kitab, which means book. In nominative, it's kitabu. In genitive, it's kitabi. In accusative, it's kitaba.
الكتاب الممتاز
This means the excellent book. The noun kitab is in the nominative, and the adjective is also inflected to agree with the noun.
أنا أقرأ كتابا
This means I am reading a book. Here, kitab is in the accusative, and it's indefinite. The N sound at the end here indicates that it's indefinite.
مؤلف الكتاب
This means the author of the book. Here, kitab is in the genitive case. These case endings are not used at the end of a sentence, but only when the word is followed by something. The form at the end of a sentence without a case ending is called the pausal form. These case endings are often not used in Modern Standard Arabic. They're generally only used in prepared texts or prepared speeches.
All right, let's begin the interview with Darren Duke.
First of all, I've been interested in languages since I was a little kid. I went to Disney World with my parents, and I was from a small town in southern Arkansas where everybody spoke Southern English, and that was the only patois I knew. And then I got to southern Florida, and all of a sudden there are people from all over the world making strange sounds, and they seem to be able to communicate with one another, and I was fascinated. And then when I got to my teenage years, seventh, eighth grade, I wanted to learn a foreign language. And my mother said, so I had some pocket money and I bought a French-English dictionary. And she goes, "Silly boy, you can't learn a language from a dictionary." And I said, "Well, I'll show her." And so probably out of just sheer teenage rebellion, I just, started beating my head against the French language. Wow. And then I was able to study French in middle school, and then I continued in high school. And then when I got to the Naval Academy as a young midshipman, I took languages, and I found that I had a proficiency for them, that it was easily gained. And of course, at the Naval Academy, the better grades you get, the more liberty you get. You get to go off campus more as a midshipman, as a military cadet. And I had a girlfriend that was 50 miles away, who's now my wife of 30 years. And so if my GPA was higher, I could see her more often. And so I began to stack language courses in my curriculum.
Great motivation.
Very pure and righteous motivation there. And it worked and it paid off. So I graduated, and with having studied German, Japanese, and French at the Naval Academy. And then I got in. I was commissioned as a Marine Corps officer, and got into my career initially as an intelligence officer, and then later as a special operations officer. And in intelligence and in special operations, cross-cultural communications are key, and so languages are important. A time in my career came when I could focus on a particular region. I applied to a particular program the Marine Corps is offering called the Foreign Area Officer Program, which included graduate school and language training. And I told the Marine Corps in my application, I said, hey, I've got a lot of different languages that I'm exposed to. I've lived in the Far East. I did my first tour out in the Far East theater, but I'm also interested in the Middle East. So wherever you send me, I'll be happy to go. And that should back up a little bit. I also had an engagement with my pastor when I was a young man where I pulled his VHS off of his shelf one time because I saw the word Hebrew, and I opened it up and I saw all these squiggly letters. And he said, oh, that's the Bible written in the original language. And I remember thinking at that time, I would love to be able to learn this language. And so that's another incident that happened in my childhood. Now back to the story. So I told the Marine Corps, hey, you guys send me where you think the needs of the service are. I'll go to the Far East or to the Near East. And they selected me to be a Middle East Foreign Area Officer. So went to Monterey, California, and to the Defense Language Institute and studied Modern Standard Arabic and Modern Hebrew there. And then we moved to Israel 2000. Yeah. So we arrived in Jerusalem on December 31st, 2000, and we spent the whole year 2001 in Jerusalem. And I studied Arabic and Hebrew at Hebrew University in Mount Scopus. And so that's really where my introduction to Semitic languages came, was through my work in the military. I would describe the challenges of learning Arabic to English speakers as being in three categories. One is certainly the alphabet, right? That's the first thing you see. Is the letters are squiggly, they're different, they're not square and blocky like ours. They're concatenated, that is, they're frequently connected to each other, except when they're not, and there's exceptions to those rules, so that's confusing. Sometimes it's only from the right side of the letter, and some letters change form depending on whether they're standing alone or at the beginning of the word or in the middle or at the end. So that's an obstacle that English speakers have to get over. The good news is in this regard that unlike English, Arabic is generally pronounced like it's written, with one exception that is easily learned in the first couple of lessons. So it does have that improvement over the English language.
Yeah.
The second challenge, I think, is pronunciation. One of the names of Arabic, the poetic titles given to Arabic, is it's the language of the letter Dhad, or in Arabic, Lughat Dhad. And it's a letter that no other language has. And it's a letter that's pronounced in the back of the mouth with the tip of the tongue on the top of the front teeth, and it's a hollow kind of sound, dhad. But there are also other letters that are unusual for English speakers, like the khaf and the ha and the gha, the ghain, and the ayn. And so those guttural letters are also a challenge, I think, for particularly for people who don't want to be embarrassed by mispronouncing them, or they're so strange in their sound. Now, of course, there's a rolling R. That's a challenge for some folks. And if you think about it, there are two S's and two T's. There's a sin and a sod and a ta and a ta. And so when you're trying to read through the words and figure out how to write them, that could be a challenge.
Yeah.
The third challenge would be, it's the double challenge of differences between classical Arabic, called Fusha or Modern Standard Arabic, that is spoken and written across the Arabic-speaking world by those who are educated generally, and then the spoken language of a particular place, and then the additional challenge that in multiple places there are different dialects. And so that's a double challenge to English speakers. These dialects generally involve not only the use of different vocabulary, but also a change in pronunciation of certain letters. And so these dialects are bewildering when a new Arabic learner walks into them and tries to use the language.
So for an English speaker to kind of wrap their mind around the differences between the dialects, Is there an analogy between English dialects, like maybe between British English and American English, that would be a similar difference, or is it even wider?
So depending where you are, it's wider. So I'll just take Shamia, or the dialect of Lebanon, Syria, Israel, and the West Bank and Palestinian territories. That dialect is heavily affected by the Syriac language, which is a dialect of Aramaic, a later dialect of Aramaic that was spoken by the Christians across the Fertile Crescent before the Islamic invasions in the 7th century. And so many of the vocabulary words in daily use in Shamia, or in Lebanese dialect or Syrian dialect, are actually, the roots of them are Syriac roots. They're not modern standard Arabic roots. So that's one way that's different from our English dialects. Our English dialects, we take in a lot of loan words from other languages, but in general, it doesn't divide us that as much as Shamia is divided from, for example, Fusha or Khaliji dialect of the Gulf.
Huh. Okay. So are there some that are as similar, though, as British and American English?
I've found that the largest differences are between the North African dialects and, for example, the Iraqi dialect, which is close to Gulf dialect, but it has its own specialties. And of course, it has taken in itself a lot of, Iraqi dialect has taken in a lot of Turkish and Assyrian words and some Persian as well.
Okay.
So as you go east to west, the further you go east to west, the greater the differences. Now, because of media and movies, so the center of Arabic language movie production over the decades of the 20th century was in Cairo. And so everybody understands Egyptian dialect from movies and television shows. And then second to that would be Lebanese dialect, because many of the writers during the Renaissance in the late 1800s, early 1900s in Arabic literature was coming out of Lebanon as well as Egypt and Syria. So that dialect, I would say, is second in terms of everybody understanding it.
What is it that makes something poetic in Arabic? Is it rhyme? Is it rhythm? Is it a variation of things?
I think primarily it's the rhyme that's natural to the language. It's part of so the case endings in Arabic, and it's not highly inflected, but the case endings in Arabic lend itself to rhyme very easily. So if every word that's in the nominative case, for example, that's used as a subject of the sentence, ends in the vowel u, which it does, or if it's in the accusative, it's an object of the sentence, it ends in the letter n, like an, then you see how you could structure your sentences no matter what the actual words are. They're all going to have the same vowel or consonantal ending, so that lends itself to poetic arrangement. I think also the richness of the vocabulary itself. Arabic is extremely rich in vocabulary. It's taken in words from Persian, the Syriac inclusions, and it's just very broad in the way it expresses things. And so you have a lot of words to choose from that allow you to write poetry that's really beautiful.
Yeah. What about parallelism?
So you don't get as much parallelism like we do in biblical Hebrew, but what you do get is you get the repetition of the verb and the object using the same root, and that is a type of parallelism, if you will, because he fruited much fruit. Thamara thamaran kabiran. He gave a lot of fruit, and so the use of the same root in two different parts of speech together is an acceptable thing. That in English that sounds unusual to us, right? It doesn't fall on the English ear well, but on the Arabic speaker that sounds very poetic.
Now with Hebrew, we have what we call typically the construct chain or forms. Is the same thing happening in Arabic?
It's very close. That's a great point. All the Semitic languages that I've studied thus far have strong construct mechanisms, and Arabic is the same way. It has a dual, so it has a singular, a plural, and a dual, and they use the dual quite a lot. So, walid is father, and waladay is my father, and waladain is my two parents, right? So. And then if you want to say your two parents, it's waladayka, so you put the ka on the end, and that indicates you masculine, second person masculine.
Okay. Do they call it construct, or what do they call it What's the grammatical term when you're talking within Arabic?
Yeah, so in Arabic it's called idafa, which means addition.
Let's get into some interesting idioms from Arabic. That's always something that is delightful to hear, how different countries express idiomatically.
Well, you can imagine for a language that's as poetic as Arabic, you're going to have a ton of idioms. I just picked a few that come from daily use that I use a lot. The first one is kharabta dunya. So dunya is the world. It's a word for the world as we know it, not the planet Earth, but just the cosmos, if you will. It's used in Aramaic as well. And dunya is particularly used in the Egyptian dialect. And kharaba is to mess something up. It's to do damage to something. And so if someone makes a mess, you can say kharabta dunya. Or if I made a mess, I say ana kharabtu dunya, and everybody will laugh, because that's a common idiom for screwing something up. Another Egyptian idiom you can use is when something good happens to someone, you can say ya anharak abyad, which means yeah is kind of the vocative.
Okay.
You say ya anharak abyad. Anharak is your day, and abyad is white. So, your day is white. And so that goes to the culture of shame and honor in the Near Eastern societies, that if you have a white face, that you're honored, and if you have a black face, then you're downcast. So to say that someone is having a white day, it means that something good has happened.
Okay. Huh.
The next one I would say that's really kind of a very it's a gracious way to say thank you when someone gives you something like a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, or when a waiter brings something to your table and puts your food in front of you. You say tislam idek, and it means basically peace to your hands, or may your service to me bring you peace. It's just really gracious. It's a great way, instead of just saying, thank you, it's in our cultural idiom. We say it all the time. And they say, of course, tislam idek a lot, but when you come to it from the outside and you think about the meaning the first time, it's a very gracious way to thank someone for their service to you.
I love that. Yeah.
And then the last one, when you leave somebody, you say ma'asalama, with peace. But there's another common saying that people say to each other, and it's Allah ya'tik al-afiyah. Allah, God, ya'tik, may He give you al-afiyah. And afiyah is interesting. It comes from the word afu, which is both to erase or to relieve or to forgive. It means may God give you relief from all your burdens. Allah ya'tik al-afiyah. And you say back, there's a response that you have to say, and you can't say the same thing back. You say Allah ya'afik, which means may God also relieve you. And I just think that's a great idiom for two people who are parting ways.
That is delightful. So for those who are listening, Hebrew has a stem system of verbs that takes on different features depending on the stem, and that stem may or may not have, in a particular verb, an effect on either making the verb passive or making it more intensive or making it reflexive, something you do to yourself. That's a really unique, maybe completely unique to Semitic languages. I
agree, and I would I would add to what you just said. Arabic has the same thing. So just like you have the nifal and the hufal in Hebrew that express kind of a passive, in Arabic you have a passive measure, and then you can change the vowels in another measure to make that even a passive participle in a different measure. So there are multiple ways of getting to the passive voice, and so learning that in Arabic is very important to being able to express oneself and to understand what's being expressed.
So in Hebrew we call them stems. You're saying they're called measures? So
like kal, nifal, pl, the stems, those are called measures in Arabic. And the word comes from actual Arabic. It's wazn. So wazn awwal, the first measure, wazn thani, the second measure. That's the Arabic grammatical term for it.
Now, when like a native speaker of Arabic, are they actually thinking about stems? Like if they weren't educated, I'm assuming they wouldn't be like, okay, I'm going to use this measure now.
They do not.
To them, is it just a different word, or do they recognize immediately the relation to the root?
This is the question I am continually asking myself as a linguist. Because no, I don't meet anybody who speaks these languages that thinks this way when they're a native speaker. Now, as a learner, I try to come up with ways to express an idea, and sometimes I'll take a second to think, I'm going to use the 10th measure to express this, or I'm going to use the passive of the second measure instead of what would normally be a passive in, let's say, the 10th measure. And I use that on purpose to try to see if I can express a different idea. But what you'll see is, here's what's interesting, is if you'll go to one dialect and they will choose to use, like, let's say, a passive in the 10th measure. And then you go to another dialect and they don't use that at all. They use it in a passive participle of the second measure, for example.
Okay.
And that's a vocabulary difference. They wouldn't see that as a verbal system difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me frame this next question along those lines, just for the listeners. So in Hebrew, we look up a word in the dictionary or in a lexicon by its 3-letter root or by the third-person masculine singular form of that verb. In English, we look up a verb in the infinitive, right? So that there's a difference there. I'm wondering, how do native Arabic speakers look up words in their dictionaries?
It's arranged the same way that Hebrew is. So you look up the 3-letter root in the third-person masculine past tense. So if you were going to look up to write, for example, that would be under kataba, and kataba is the third-person masculine past tense for he wrote, and you look it up that way.
Oh, okay. So they do have to be able to parse down to the root.
That's correct. And if you look under KTB, Kataba, in the Hans Wehr dictionary, for example, which is the dictionary for Arabic to English understanding, you will see all the permutations underneath there. First of all, they'll list the verbs in all the measures that it exists in. And just as in Hebrew and other Semitic languages, sometimes in a particular stem, there is nothing present in that stem for that particular combination or that root. So it'll list all those out, and it'll give all the semantic breadth of that word, and then it'll go into all the nouns and all the adjectives based off of that, and then give, hopefully, if it's a good dictionary like the Hans Wehr, it'll give forms of expression as examples.
Gotcha. Okay. So since we've established that there's a ton of overlap with Hebrew and Arabic, I'm assuming that translating, especially the Old Testament, into Arabic is probably one of the easiest things out of any language. It's probably easier to translate into Arabic than any other language.
You know, one would think so, right? Because they're from the same family. Mm-hmm. But, you know, despite the fact that Hebrew and Arabic share the same linguistic structure, and despite the fact that many Arabic-speaking cultures are still desert cultures, much like periods of the desert life or the nomadic existence of the Israelites of the Hebrew Bible, technically sound and spiritually rich Bible translation into Arabic has not been as straightforward and easy as a process if you look at the history of it.
Okay.
I mean, thankfully today we do have really good translations into Arabic, and I think, you know, this can be this challenge can be attributed to, I think, the emergence of Islam in the 7th century and how Islam staked out the boundaries of spiritual expression in the language, even as it did in defining what worldviews and beliefs were acceptable in the public space. And I think that was probably one of the challenges. I think, you know, it took a couple of centuries for the Christian communities in the Near East that went from they were in favored status with the Sassanid Persian Empire, and then they went to being in a disfavored status, and they kind of went into a survival mode. And so they spoke Syriac for a couple of centuries and adopted Arabic very slowly. And I think despite some great examples of interfaith dialogue or religious debate, there just wasn't a lot of translation of the Bible into Arabic from Syriac and its dialects. That's where I attribute the difficulty. So both the role of Islam and its control of spiritual language, as well as the history between the Christian communities and the Islamic powers as they establish themselves.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason why it's been so difficult. But once again, there's some great work being done today. I know there's some folks that are continually trying to improve, not only in modern standard Arabic and classical Arabic, the translation, but also trying to do translation work into some of the dialects to help get across some of the concepts that the scriptures are communicating the gospel in.
Now, what I hear you expressing is the sociolinguistic difficulty of translating the Bible. Would that be fair? Because we usually divide, like the language in and of itself, and then the sociolinguistic factors or elements that are involved in, the status of the language or the religious connotations of the language, all of that kind of thing.
When I read both, I feel the same kind of internal response to, without getting, I'm trying to stay in the linguistic side of it here, but I feel the same kind of response to the flow of the language, the meter, that I do when I read the other. But I think the choices of expression are sufficiently different that they can't be. It's just not a matter of using the same root in Arabic that you used in Hebrew, even though the same roots may be available. There's been some drift between the meanings of the roots, so you can't really just adopt that straight across. And then in some cases, there's been metathesis with those root letters, right? They've changed places. So there's a linguistic way you couldn't do it. And then in other places, there's just been a consonantal shift in one particular consonant or a vowel that makes it sufficiently distant that it's just not recognized without a linguist looking at it, and it might not sound right. That's not the word we would use for that particular means of expression. So from a linguistic perspective, I think those are the challenges.
Okay, so like close relatives, it may actually make it harder for them to get along because they are close relatives.
That's right.
Interesting. Okay, so I had not heard this. So the similarity may actually be one of the difficulties besides the socio-cultural issues going on.
That's right. So if a particular verb, let's just say, has over the history of Arabic, let's say they started with a common root somewhere, and then a northern Semitic language like Hebrew and a southern Semitic language like Arabic, the cousins got separated for centuries, even though there was communication between them. But over time, the verb to go or to cross, araba, gets transmogrified into abara in a certain setting. So you get that going on. That's where the consonants actually move place, but they have the same meaning. But they may not be recognized by the other anymore for several reasons. But then you might have a situation where they have the same root that's present in both languages, but one word floats up to a higher, more poetic or abstract meaning, and in one language context, and then in another context, it stays the same in a daily use category. So if you chose to use that in the other, then it sounds highfalutin where it shouldn't, or vice versa. And I see that a lot in Syriac, Arabic, and Hebrew. I just want to encourage people who are interested in this field that if you have an interest, you shouldn't be in any way intimidated. I mean, the only way to learn these languages is to jump in and enjoy them. And there's a lot of joy in meeting Arabic-speaking peoples and spending time hearing how they see the world and being able to build relationships with them. One of my most rich experiences in the Middle East was actually when I was deployed on a mission to Sudan. And then late one night, I'm sitting there with this man in a remote place, and we were just talking. And he said to me, he says, you should become a Muslim. And I said, why? He says, well, you speak Arabic. And I said, oh, is that the reason why? And he goes, yeah, I mean, look, you could have 2 wives. And I'm like, why would I want that? I said, don't you know the Oak Ridge Boys song, Trying to Love 2 Women is Like a Ball and Chain? And then I said, no, he said to me, no, you should become a Muslim because you speak Arabic already. I said, well, maybe I learned Arabic so that you would become a Christian. And he didn't know how to process that, right? Because, Muslims look at us as Christians as being like iPhone version 1. They're like the iPhone 13. Why would I want to go back and have an iPhone 1? There's this doctrine of supersessionism. But it was this wonderful relationship that over time I would tell him parables from the New Testament. Hey, there was this man and he had these 2 sons, and one of them, the younger one, came to him one day and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm out of here. Just give me what I'm going to get in my inheritance." Can you believe that? And to see this cultural reaction to this story that was very similar because of the culture to the same way the original hearers heard that story was really kind of wonderful. And so I think people who are looking at an opportunity to get to know a culture and a linguistic tradition that has that kind of original audience feel to the scriptures, I think is a tremendous opportunity. So I would encourage people who, if you have any indication that you're interested in Semitic languages, take the leap, and it'll be a great journey.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I just want to deeply express my gratitude for taking the time to be with us and share what you've learned. And yeah, it's been great.
Well, this is a real honor and a pleasure for me, Andrew, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you haven't already, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. That really helps other people discover this and be blessed by it. Here at Working for the Word, we believe the Bible is a unified, God-breathed, God-centered, hope-giving book, sweeter than honey, and pointing to Jesus. This podcast exists ultimately to help us treasure the Bible more, go deeper into it, and become like the man of Psalm 1.